Good morning, everyone. I hope you guys can hear me. Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Hi, guys. I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much for allowing me the time to speak today. Indeed, my name is Mbali Nwoko, and I am a farmer based in Johannesburg, and I'm joining all of you guys from Johannesburg. I was given three topics today to speak about. Basically, what are the key challenges faced by emerging commercial farmers? Are such challenges unique to South Africa, and are they replicated across the continent? And furthermore, I'll be speaking about what can emerging commercial farmers across Africa do to have their voices heard and taken seriously, most importantly, by policymakers. So on the last point that Wandile mentioned is that definitely we need some blended finance for farmers. And that's one of the key challenges, I think, facing emerging farmers in South Africa today, simply being access to markets, finance, information, logistics, cold chain storage, as well as training. And the reason why I say that is because a number of farmers struggle to raise finance on their farms, whether it's on a personal or business capacity. And the reason for this is because a number of financial institutions have rigid financing models and requirements that do not meet the farmers' needs and or profiles. To give you a bit of a background, I've been an entrepreneur now for about 8 years. Green Terrace was not my first business. I had another business prior to that. But having gone into the agricultural sector and being a farmer, I definitely can attest to how difficult it is to raise finance for my agribusiness, simply because I don't think there's a huge appetite for primary agriculture. I'm a vegetable farmer, so I'm definitely playing within the primary agricultural space. And you tend to see that my experience has been that a lot of the finance that exists today, especially geared around farming, is plays along the lines of value add, such as agro processing, any agri-tech businesses. So you have to be an entrepreneur in the agricultural space with some form of tech element to be, I suppose, attractive to potential investors. And not enough, I think, support or financial models are geared towards building commercial farmers or emerging commercial farmers, specifically at a primary level. Because I think financiers see that as a huge risk and things because of like climate change and drought. And it's difficult because to play in the commercial space or in the mainstream in agriculture, agriculture also, especially at the primary level, requires significant amount of investment and capital. I mean, we're forced now as farmers to farm sustainably, intensively, looking at environment, considering consumers as well in terms of how we produce food. And all these things come at a cost from a primary level. You have to build greenhouses, get the latest irrigation systems, fertigation systems, and think of all these other things that can help you streamline your processes, and that comes at a hefty price. And so it's very difficult to grow and scale as a farmer, especially from a primary agricultural perspective, where financing institutions really don't have geared financing models that could help and support farmers playing in this level. And so I definitely think one of the solutions is that we could try create a Silicon Valley of some sort for agriculture, where farmers and agribusinesses can be supported right from startup to commercial stage, coming up with very easy or flexible payment terms. And because farming is quite complex and can take some time to realize your return on investment. And so if you don't have the right expertise and support behind you, I definitely think the number or the level of farmers in South Africa won't grow. In addition to that, coming to the next point is that these challenges are not unique in South Africa. I have a podcast and I just recently interviewed a farmer based in Zambia, and she expressed how her lack of storage and cold chain facilities are a big hindrance to her business growth, as well as a number of other farmers in the area. And the reason why she cannot access these resources, the cold chain and storage facilities, is because she's not producing at scale. And the reason why she's not producing at scale is because of another other factors in which is another topic on its own. And so facilities like that, because she's a maize farmer or a grain farmer, facilities like accessing cold storage and cold chain and storage facilities for her maize are quite expensive, and they do not make financial sense for a farmer at her level to be able to send her produce to those storage facilities. So a number of other countries, I mean, in West Africa, for example, there are other countries that have really bad infrastructure, no good roads, electricity supply, which results in major crop losses post-harvest while getting a product to market. And I think South Africa is not too far behind with our uncertainty of our main power supplies. So challenges like access to markets, finance, information, logistics, cold chain, storage and training are definitely felt across the board throughout the African continent amongst emerging commercial farmers. I know I touched a lot on finance, but even markets, I think there's so many high barriers to entry for markets, but you know, wearing an entrepreneur's hat, I always say that even in my conversations to farmers is that we should think of ourselves as entrepreneurs and try seek alternative markets, because typically in platforms like this, my view is that when we talk about markets, we typically look at retailers and established food processors, etc. But I think on the ground, what I'm starting is definitely you have so many opportunities for different markets, unconventional markets, where food is such a requirement and a necessity, and there's so many other channels that farmers can access markets. So, but I guess for farmers to get their products onto the main retail shelves, the barriers still remain high. I know, having dealt personally with retailers, is that sometimes what you really want to produce, a lot of the buyers or procurement people may not want to take that product, simply because they would say that they want to give opportunities to the already existing farmers that have supplied that product for years. So it makes it very difficult for new entrants or new farmers to really enter into these long retail supply chains, because their growing programs and their procurement programs are already established and given to farmers who've been farming for 20 years and more. So if you do get an opportunity to get into the retail, typically what you would find is that you would be given a crop to grow that really doesn't make good return on investment on what you're producing at your farm in most cases. And so the last question that I'm touching on is, what can emerging commercial farmers across Africa do to have their voices heard and taken seriously by policymakers? And this is a tough one for me, because you know, on a personal level, I sometimes feel discouraged or have little to no appetite in liaising with people in government or policy making, simply because of the media reports that we see and hear about the level of corruption that exists amongst those in power. And so, I mean, you hear it from farmers that have been farming for much longer than I have, and their interventions to try and, you know, change certain policies in government and in those institutions that have the power to change the policies. And you hear about how many there have failed attempts over the years to really maybe try and transform the sector, or, you know, push to grow the sector, you know, have drought relief funds for the sector, really look after farmers' interests. But from what I see and what I read as well, most importantly, I think we should commend agricultural associations for doing their best to hold government accountable for their actions, for trying to grow the industry and look after farmers' interests. And so I think, coming back to the farmers, what we can do on the ground is really to continue to push boundaries in our own corners of the world, try to collaborate with other farmers and work very closely to obviously grow the agricultural value chain, and try solve our own problems ourselves, come up with our own solutions, because we know what we experience on the ground that's best. And so I feel like for us to have our voices heard as farmers is definitely to collaborate, to work together, try seek alternative interventions that can help us grow the sector. And that is when I feel like, when you have a more active approach, other institutions like government, like policymakers, will then see the work that you're doing on the ground, and then you'll be in a position to dictate how you want to be supported as a farmer, and what interventions could work best for our agribusinesses. And so I definitely feel like, and this is just me, because I'm always just an active individual. I believe in just doing things and try solve my own problems on my own and not wait for someone else to help. But I think on a larger scale, the industry needs to be supported in much greater detail. But for policymakers to take farmers seriously, I think farmers should try solve their own problems and try push boundaries and implement certain interventions that could progress their own businesses. And therefore, once you do that long enough, certain institutions and government bodies will then take notice, and then you will then be in a playing field to say, this is how you can support us. We've tried this model, we've tested it, and it works, and we could scale at much faster pace if you guys intervened in such and such ways. So I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you for allowing me the time to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. There are some, can we maybe have some of the Menti questions on the, can we see it on the screen? Okay. So we've got a couple of minutes, but there's a few things that, well, there's been